Good morning and welcome to the quarterly board meeting of the California Board of Psychology. I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones and other devices to silent. You may notice board members during the course of the meeting accessing their laptops or other devices. The reason for that is that we're using the devices to look at board meeting materials. It's not because we're coasting or surfing the web, coasting the web. Where did I get that from? It's not because we're surfing the web, but we're trying to go to a paper-light environment that's more environmentally friendly and more efficient. We've allocated time on the agenda for each item as to public comment, and we'll ask for public comment on each agenda item. I ask that you be respectful of our time constraints and the need to conduct and complete the board's business. If there are several members of the public seeking to comment on a particular agenda item, I will set a time limit on each speaker to ensure maximum participation. The board welcomes public comments on any items not on the or any item on the agenda, and it's the board's intent to ask for public comments prior to taking any action on those items. In making public comment, please do not identify any licensee or registrant of the board by name in order to avoid prejudicing any possible future actions that may be required of board members in our capacity as a deliberative body. I would like to call the meeting to order and to ask that, who's calling roll today? Mr. Glass-Steagall, would you call roll?
Absolutely.
Here.
Aye. Here.
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 Present.
Here.
Here. Here.
Thank you very much. And we have a full complement of board members for the first time since I can't remember when. Yay! That's great. Great. Before proceeding any further, I would like to thank Senator Glazer and Sarah Huckle for making this room available to us. We do attempt to have our board meeting in the State Capitol building when we can. During our quarterly board meeting in February, and it's a really spectacular space, and we're very much appreciative of the opportunity to be here. Okay, the next item, jump ahead on the agenda. Okay, what we're going to do now is swear in two new board members that have joined us, and I would ask each of them, I would actually ask both of them to approach, but I'm going to swear you each in seriatim. So if you could please come forward. I'm going to use, or do you want to hold the book for me? Okay. I'm going to read it for you, and then you can repeat it back to me. Okay? I repeat your name.
I, Leah Tate,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties on which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. Okay, ready? Okay. I repeat your name.
I, Mary Harb Sheets,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, congratulations to our two newest members. I would like to also take a moment to acknowledge someone that recently left the board, and that is the much beloved Dr. Michael Erickson, who is here. Dr. Erickson assures me that he's worn his board uniform so that we can recognize him. And let me just, before presenting it to him, read the Certificate of Appreciation from the board. Presented by the California Board of Psychology to Michael Erickson, PhD, in recognition of your dedicated leadership in the protection of consumers of psychological services, your capable stewardship during a crucial period of transition, and your warmth and kindness, as both a member and president of the California Board of Psychology from August 10, 2010 to December 17, 2018. Congratulations, Dr. Erickson.
My pleasure. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with all of you. And, favorite part of my career, I think, was these years on the board. So thank you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Okay. The third agenda item is public comment on items not on the agenda. Before I invite speakers to come forward, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names, as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, and they could provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. Okay, please be aware that public comment during this agenda item should provide information to board members and is not open to comments from board members. The only action board members can take is to listen to comments and decide whether they want a future agenda item on that topic. Although this may give the impression that we are not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. So with that being said, are there any members of the public that would like to discuss items not on our agenda? Dr. Linda Crow?
Is it on? Yes. Okay. Good morning. I'm Dr. Jo Linder Crow. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the California Psychological Association. I would like to request on behalf of CPA that the board add to the agenda for its next meeting an item to consider the creation of a registration system for testing technicians in the state of California. The use of testing technicians to administer and score psychological or neuropsychological tests under the direct supervision of licensed psychologists is within well-established standards of practice and is an effective, efficient way to expand the availability of testing services. Testing technicians are recognized in many states' laws and by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the National Association of Neuropsychologists, the American Academy of Neuropsychology, and APA's Division of Neuropsychology. There is no law currently in California at this point that addresses this. So this would create regulatory structure and oversight of this group of individuals. And I also want to thank the BOP staff for their time in meeting with my staff about this issue in a preliminary discussion in order to help us refine this request.
Thank you, Dr. Linda Crow. So if we could make a notation of that as a potential future agenda item, that'd be great. Are there any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to item number 4, which is the President's report.
Sorry.
In your packet, you'll see the 2019 meeting calendar and locations for board meetings. I would note, as Mr. Fu reminded me this morning, that the first Outreach and Education Committee meeting, I always get these committees confused, particularly at this time of the morning. The first Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting has been moved to March 18th, as opposed to as indicated on the schedule. Now, it's been a long time since we've really had any major changes in the compositions of our committees, but we have had changes now because of the addition of new board members, so we could more fairly allocate the workload among a variety of different people. So the licensing committee will now be, as chaired by Dr. Horn, will be Dr. Mary Harb Sheets and Mr. Seiran Fu. I've stepped down from the licensing committee, which I've served on for a number of years. The Outreach and Education Committee, chaired by Ms. Bernal, it will constitute Lucille Akwebadu and Dr. Leah Tate. The Policy and Advocacy Committee, as chaired by Mr. Fu, will include Dr. Kasuga, Ms. Jones, and myself. And then there are ad hoc committees. The Applied Behavioral Analysis Task Force and the EPPP2 Task Force will be chaired by Dr. Kasuga. I'm not going to go through that long list of names because it's not really necessary at this point. And then the Enforcement Committee, as chaired by Dr. Akwebadu, will continue to have me as her member. The dream team lives on. We still heard you. The Sunset Review Committee will be myself and Mr. Fu. It's typical for the president and vice president of the board to be the Sunset Review Committee. We do anticipate this year receiving questions from the legislature in anticipation of our Sunset Review in 2020. But those will, when those questions come and responses are drafted, those will also come to the full board for consideration. We're just kind of the first vetting as it relates to that. And finally, the Telepsychology Committee lives on. Yay! Yay, Dr. Erickson. And that will constitute myself as the chair, and Dr. Erickson has graciously agreed, since we have a little bit of business to finish, to continue on in the capacity as a public member of that committee. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Erickson. Okay. Are there any questions on or comments on the president's report? Typically not.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
President Phillips, I have a question about the calendar. Is it true it's 3 days of the meeting in April, and is there a reason that that's the case?
Yeah, there was a determination made. We could either have one additional meeting. This was discussed at a prior board meeting where I think you weren't available to come. That we could either have an additional board meeting, which would be a fifth 2-day board meeting, or a 1-day board meeting, or we can consolidate it. And it was decided, the sentiment of the board was that we were going to consolidate it into a 3-day meeting. That being because we have so many petition hearings these days that it's very difficult for us often to get to our agenda items. So often chairs are prepared to discuss particular agenda items, and they're never given the opportunity to actually tell us what's going on with their committee or to fully address topics. So at that meeting, we'll be having, I believe, we're planning on having 2 days of petition hearings. We'll have 2 days of petition hearings and enforcement considerations so that we can get caught up with the backlog. and also so that we don't feel so pressed on time as it relates to petition committee hearings. I don't think any of us really are thrilled with the idea of having a 3-day meeting, but
That wasn't my reason for asking, but thank you. I just wanted to know if there was if some kind of extra day, like, visiting the legislator or something. I was just curious if there was something
that's
special.
perfect.
But thank you. That's
Perfectly
helpful
makes sense
for
to
me.
me.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comment from the board or from the public? Hearing none, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Sork for the executive officer's report.
Good morning, board members. Included in your meeting materials is agenda item 5A and B, the executive officer's report, which includes just a staffing update, as well as the annual report that was submitted through the Department of Consumer Affairs to the state legislature. The annual report has information on licensing statistics, enforcement statistics, and some of the board's accomplishments for the last calendar year. So I'm happy to entertain any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, we're happy to introduce Ms. Karen Nelson, who is with the Department of Consumer Affairs Board and Bureau Services, and she is here to give us the DCA executive update. She's become a favorite featured speaker at each of our meetings.
Good morning, everyone. Karen Nelson, Assistant Deputy Director for DCA's Office and Board and Bureau Services. President Phillips, Vice President Fu, board members, Executive Officer Sork, thank you again for allowing us to provide a brief update at each of your board meetings. And so I'll make this brief. I do know that you have some time certain business to attend to. But first, I wanted to go over some highlights from 2018. This past year, we convened 9 licensing and enforcement workgroup meetings, 3 substance abuse coordination committee meetings, 4 director quarterly meetings, and 2 director board and advisory committee leadership teleconferences. These activities not only brought us together to promote open dialogue with our boards and bureaus, but also promoted collaboration to further our mission in protecting California's consumers. We wanted to thank the board for their active participation in many of these convenings. So thank you so much for being active and being available for each of those sessions. Next, with the annual report, your executive officer just mentioned that you had a copy of the board-specific report in your materials, but did want to let you know that the annual report for the entire DCA is available online. And as Ms. Sork mentioned, the report contains statistical and financial record of the work that the department and its boards and bureaus have achieved over the past year. And when you have a moment, I do encourage you all to review the document. It is available online. With regard to the transition and the governor's budget, as you all know, on Monday, January 7th, Governor Newsom was sworn in as our 40th governor of California. We at DCA are honored and excited to be a part of this team, and our department is looking forward to doing all that we can to further the governor's mission. As for our current appointees, there's nothing you need to do other than continuing the service and great work that you all are doing on this board. And we have been currently working with a team to look at vacancies, appointment vacancies, and pending reappointments. With regard to the budget, on January 10th, the governor released his budget outlining the fiscal priorities for the state of California. And based on the driving idea of California for all, the governor's budget proposes to pay down debts and pension obligations, continues to build up robust budget reserves, while making significant investments in housing, childcare, healthcare, prescription drugs, preschool, and higher education. And on the same day the budget was released, the director held a teleconference with board leadership, executive officers, and bureau chiefs to discuss the governor's 2019 and 2020 proposed budget, and to also review proposals within the budget specific to the department. Our fiscal operations team have followed up with each of our programs to discuss individual budgets in greater details. And it's my understanding that the budget team has met with the board in January 16th. With regard to AB 2138, I do know that you have that on your agenda later on, actually for tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And wanted to just say, because AB 2138 affects nearly every board and bureau, the department has taken steps to support our programs to achieve successful implementation. At the last Directors Quarterly meeting, DCA provided our boards and bureaus with a draft implementation timeline to stay on track for July 2020. It's important to note that to stay on track, action will be required by all programs by May 2019. DCA's preliminary assessment is that AB 2138 might take approximately 50 regulations packages to implement. The Legal Affairs Division has developed model regulations and have shared them with our programs, and where feasible, DCA will take the lead on collecting data for reporting requirements and complete one report to the legislature. Actually, at this time, I wanted to acknowledge the board and actually Ms. Sorick for her leadership in gathering our healing arts programs and convening them to see where there are areas of regulation that may be common to all of our healing arts programs. With regards to the Director's Quarterly meeting on February 25th, the Director will host his first 2019 Director's Quarterly meeting. And at this meeting, DCA will provide an update on the DCA Regulations Unit, the Executive Officer Salary Study, and other division updates. And as you may recall, these meetings are an opportunity to ensure that the Director is available and open to hear any important issues that may be facing our boards and bureaus. And this specific one is probably for Ms. Tate and Ms. Harb Sheets. This is the required board member orientation training. Congratulations again on both of your appointments to the board. We look forward to working with you both during your term. The board member orientation trainings are one-day training that is required upon appointment and reappointment to the board. It's a one-day training in Sacramento, and actually I do want to say we do have one now in Southern California based on feedback from our boards and bureaus. The dates, and please, you don't need to jot these down. We'll make sure to send this over to the program. It's March 27th, June 19th, and October 23rd. The June offering will be in Southern California. If you would like to go ahead and take that offering in that part of the state, please do feel free to contact our office or Solid to make sure to register for that training. And last but certainly not least, 2019 is a mandatory sexual harassment prevention training year. And this means that all employees and all board members are required to complete this training, even if it was completed last year. The training is online, interactive, and can be completed at your convenience. If you have any questions about this or any of the trainings during your tenure, please contact our office for assistance. And that concludes the update for today. And as always, if the department can be of service to you and the board, please let us know. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Ms. Nelson, really quick, do you know if the department will be sending out a reminder about the training with a link to the training module for the sexual harassment prevention?
We should be. I know we had sent one earlier this year, but we're happy to send a reminder as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Other public comment or questions from the board? Well, thank you very much for coming. It was great seeing you. Okay. Good luck to your son on his Greek test. Okay. There's one other thing I did want to mention before we break in order to allow people to set up for the petition hearing, and that is that this being a ceremonial courtroom, or a hearing room, it does look like a courtroom though, at least from where I'm sitting, we cannot bring anything in here other than water. So to the extent that any of you are tempted to bring in other forms of refreshment or food, unfortunately that's not permitted in here. So out of respect for our historic surroundings, I'd certainly appreciate if you observe that. And with that in mind, what we're going to do then is, just so you have a preview of the day ahead, we're going to have two petition hearings, one on a petition for early termination of probation and then a petition for reinstatement of the license. Then we're going to go into closed session. There will be a very brief report before we go to a lunch break. But basically, after we've gone into closed session after the 2 hearings, we're going to be in closed session for the remainder of the day until the end of the day when we go back into open session, but only for purposes of adjourning for the day. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time in closed session today, we're anticipating. So that being the case, you can expect that you'll probably, I would hope, be out of here before 1 p.m., but certainly earlier than that, hopefully. So with that in mind, we're going to take a break so we can allow the petitioner and the Attorney General's office to be set up for purposes of the petition for early termination of probation. And we'll take let's be realistic. I'll say 5 minutes, but it'll end up being 10 minutes. Let's say we're taking a 5-minute break. Law judge. It's on.
Got it. Good morning. We're going to start with Dr. Jimenez. Prior to beginning, I just want to give a quick overview. Are both of the new board members here? Yes. Okay. I would just want to give an overview of the petition hearing. I understand that this is the first one, and it may have been a while since some of you have heard petitions. I explained to the petitioner beforehand that the purpose of the petition hearing is to focus on whether or not the petitioner is rehabilitated and is able to carry the burden of whether the petition should be granted, and in this case, whether probation should be terminated. So when Mr. Gatchett will give a brief overview of the history of the matter, Dr. Jimenez will have a chance to give a statement. Mr. Gatchett may have a few foundational questions following Dr. Jimenez's statement, and then I'll open it up to questions from the board. The board questions are intended to focus on the petitioner's rehabilitation. And in general, that's what the questions should focus on. This is not a time to give the petitioner's advice. If that's what you want to do, then the board can take that up in a different realm. And just be mindful of your board members' questions. Sometimes you all have the same questions, which makes sense, but there's no reason for the petitioner to answer each of your questions that may be the same several times. I think that's about it. So at the end, once you're done with your questions, I'll make sure that neither Mr. Gatchett nor Dr. Jimenez have anything to add, and then we'll close. There's no closing statements or anything like that. So before we start that, I'll ask you the same thing I asked petitioners. Does anybody have any questions about the procedure today? Okay. Then with that, let's go on the record. We are on the record before the Board of Psychology to review the petition for termination of Leslie Ann Jimenez, OAH number 2018-120963. My name is Heather Rowan. I'm an administrative law judge. I have been assigned to preside over this matter. Prior to going on the record today, we established that a quorum of the Board of Psychology is present. May I take the appearance for the Attorney General, please?
Good morning, Your Honor. John Gatchett, Gatschet, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General's Office. under Government Code 11522.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. And Dr. Jimenez, you are present and representing yourself today, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. Prior to going on the record, I gave you a brief overview of the petition hearing. Before we begin, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay. If questions occur to you, let me know. I can't give you legal advice, but I can help you with the procedure.
Okay.
Mr. Gatchett, did you want to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. And then briefly, I can also admit the documents that we're going to have as part of the petition if you would like me to do that after I give the brief just overview of the case.
That sounds good.
Okay. Briefly, this petitioner came as an applicant before the board and applied for licensure. During the review of her criminal background, it was discovered that she had 2 prior DUI convictions, one from 2005 and one from 2008. The board entered into a settlement with her and gave her a probationary license, and she's been on probation now for approximately 2 years, a little more than that. Her probation will terminate in January of 2020. There was a bit of a toll in this case for a period of time when she was out of practice. She had the birth of her second child and so was not practicing at that time, and so her probation tolled for a short period of time, but she is on track to terminate her probation in January of 2020. Her cost recovery is paid, so there's no outstanding costs. And as far as I understand with talking with the board, she's in compliance with all of her terms of probation. In terms of the documents that are in the file, Your Honor, if we want to turn to those, Exhibit number 1 is a decision and order with the attached statement of issues, and those are pages 1 through 18. And if Your Honor, if you're fine with this, I'll ID all the documents, and then at the end just ask for them to all be admitted at once.
Yes, please.
Okay. Exhibit 2 is a certificate of licensure, and that's page 19. Exhibit 3 is the notice of hearing documents for today, pages 20 to 21, and she is here. Exhibit 4 is her petition for early termination of probation, and those are pages 22 to 40, and I would highlight that her narrative begins on page 32. Exhibit 5 is a therapy information sheet filled out by Dr. Harrell, pages 41 to 42. Exhibit 6 is practice and billing monitor information from Dr. Aker, A-C-K-E-R, and those are pages 43 to 44. Exhibit 7 is a practice billing monitor information sheet, and that's page 45 from a Dr. Outlaw. Exhibit 8 is the petitioner's signed release for information, page 46. Exhibit 9, pages 47 through 260, are the petitioner's certified probation file kept by the board. I would note contained in those documents are the following: psychological evaluation by Dr. Nelson, pages 107 to 116, that was conducted by the board when she was placed on probation. And then Dr. Harrell, which is her psychological results, and those are pages 118 to 136. I've communicated with the petitioner this morning, and she's going to ask and make the request, and I will join in that request, pages 107 to 136, that those be put under a sealing order by OAH when they're admitted into OAH's file. And once again, that's the psychological evaluation and psychotherapy information. I could make that request in writing if the court needs, or we'll make that request orally today. And then following up, we have alcohol testing results, pages 143 to 146. Practice monitor reports 152 to 237. And then there was a probation violation early on in probation, and that's noted at 246 to 260. Finally, Exhibit 10 is a final probation report on petitioner's request for early termination of probation, and that's pages 261 to 264. I'd ask that all those exhibits 1 through 10 be marked for identification and admitted into evidence.
Dr. Jimenez, have you had a chance to review all of these documents?
I have.
Save the protective order. Do you have any objections to my admitting them?
I don't.
Okay. There's no need for a written motion. If Mr. Gatchett, if you don't have an order with you, I will create an order and have it as part of the file. That will seal Exhibit 9, pages 107 through 136. And 1 through 10 are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Dr. Jimenez, did you want to give a statement this morning?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure the board can hear you, so the mic might need to be a little bit closer.
All right.
Thank you.
Does this sound okay?
That is, thank you.
Thank you all, board members and staff members and legal counsel for allowing me to be here to talk about my history and to talk about my rehabilitative process. As I was trying to prepare about what I'd like to share with you today, I found myself thinking a lot that I still hold a lot of regret and shame and remorse for the behaviors that took place that led to these convictions. I would say that
I'm sorry, can you speak up a little bit? The
Sure.
reporter's having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry. Okay. And so I was just saying that I appreciate being here in this capacity, as I am mindful and understand and acknowledge that the behaviors that took place that led to these convictions could have had a different outcome and could have had a much more harmful outcome on myself and also other individuals. And so I just appreciate being here at this moment, being able to speak to you all today. As I was thinking about what I'd like to share, I think it's important to describe the individual who engaged in these behaviors back during this period of time, and also just to give you an understanding a little bit about how I identify with those experiences and how I've changed my life and my thought processes, and also how I sort of envision moving forward.
Ms. Metis, I made an error and it's nothing that you have done. I need to swear you in.
Okay.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give and the testimony you have already given in this hearing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your whole statement will be part of the record. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. And so as I begin to talk a little bit about my process of rehabilitation, I think it's important to describe the individual who functioned during this period of time. And I would say that it's important to discuss a little bit about, how I experienced my upbringing. I think in a lot of ways I appreciated my upbringing as an opportunity to be able to learn a lot of values when it came to, understanding what it means to sort of be a successful individual. I appreciated my upbringing as it was loving and it was stable and it provided a sense of, allowing myself to understand what responsibility is. I think that I appreciated my upbringing in that it also sort of taught me a lot of expectations, for behavior and also how to be and how to behave as an individual and how to be successful. And although that there were many positive attributes to my upbringing, in terms of providing those pro-social values and how to respect authority and how to be appropriate inside the house and outside of the house, I also experienced my upbringing as to be somewhat restrictive and also constraining. I think that there were parts of my upbringing that also allowed me to feel limited in my ability to exercise my own autonomy and also individuality. There was a sense that although there were many expectations placed on me, I felt like I didn't have an opportunity to develop my own sort of voice and own sense of me being able to define who I am. And I would say that I experienced my upbringing as somewhat having limited space to be able to make mistakes. And I think that holistically, it was an amazing upbringing, and I took a lot from that. And as I moved out of the house for the first time from my last 2 years of college, I ended up moving to San Diego and going to school at UC San Diego. And for the first time in my life, I was able to experience a little bit more of freedom and independence. And I think that I took that to a pretty intense level, as for the first time, it was my opportunity to exercise this sense of autonomy and independence. And I kind of took that to that extent in some sense. I think what I also took from that experience is that although I had an amazing upbringing and also was taught a lot of values in terms of hard work and achievement, I internalized what I learned earlier on. And I took on sort of the values of high achievement and also too just responsibility and to, how to be in certain areas of my life. And I think that that allowed me to feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure to conform and a lot of constraint. And in many ways, I think I took on a lot of anxiety as a result. Although during this time period, it was in some ways, I think, age appropriate to experience this sense of just invincibility and disregard for others. You know, I ended up taking this opportunity of being away from home, all of that kind of in culmination with one another. And it sort of led me to social circles and led me to engaging in behaviors that I think were pretty high risk and also dangerous. I used my social circle as a way to obtain a sense of balance, I think, for myself. Up at that point, I didn't really quite understand how to manage some of my expectations for myself when it came to academics, when it came to my relationships, and when it came to just engaging in different areas of my life and where I held a lot of high expectations for myself. And I utilized, I think, alcohol as a way to release and to have an outlet. I think that that was sort of my space in order to be more free and also to be free of some of the expectations that I had on myself and some of the responsibilities. I obtained my first DUI in 2005. And to be honest with you, I don't think that I really fully acknowledged the seriousness of my behavior at that point. I remember feeling ashamed, and I remember feeling embarrassed, and I also remember feeling distressed, and more so not because I felt like there was something here to explore in terms of my problematic, relationship to alcohol, but more so because I had to hold the burden of what it means to, I think, deal with the financial consequences of what it means to get a DUI. I sat, I think, and I felt more comfortable sitting in this space of denial and this space of rationalization to where I was not able to really access or be curious about this relationship that I was having to alcohol. And in a lot of ways, I sort of distanced myself from being aware of that. And although I used this opportunity to stop drinking and driving because of what was, in terms of the increase in my insurance and, having to go through a substance abuse program and all of the reparations that were needed to sort of be paid to the court, I myself did not take that opportunity to really look within and to be much more aware about my relationship to alcohol. It wasn't until I got my second DUI in 2008, which was a little less than 3 years, between my first, and that I really sat with something different in my life. My experience of obtaining my second DUI was that I sat with similar feelings that I do now at this moment in terms of just feeling a lot of shame and guilt and regret and remorse for the behaviors that led to this. I think that this was an opportunity for me to further explore much more about what my relationship to alcohol was. And it wasn't just about me being unlucky, or it wasn't about me just being this individual compared to the rest of my friends who was caught. But I think individuals in recovery sometimes describe this epiphany or this aha moment or this rock bottom. And I feel like my second DUI was my rock bottom. I think in so many ways, what I have built within my life prior to that point in terms of my high expectations for success or achievement, and also just motivating myself and being constrained in different domains in my life, I have tried so hard to be this particular individual and who I ideally wanted to be. And I think that that's also what led me to use alcohol in the way that I did, because I needed an outlet. And I think metaphorically speaking, when I obtained my second DUI, I hit my rock bottom, and I was able to sort of be much more aware and access the self-awareness that I was potentially going to compromise what I was trying so hard to build when it came to my future, when it came to where I am. And that level of distress, I think, led me to understand that I needed to shift my life in a significant way. I took that opportunity following my second DUI to take up the opportunity to move to the East Coast and enroll in a master's program in psychology. I felt like at that very moment, although I didn't have the insight and the awareness that I have at this current moment, I was anchored in this need to shift my life in a way that I could hopefully safeguard and protect my future and to move forward. I ended up moving to the East Coast to New York without any family, knowing any family or any friends, and ended up taking up this opportunity to do a master's in psychology. And I think in that very moment, I was interested and motivated in trying to reinvent and kind of reinvent my life and try to create a different network and also just engage in my life in a different way. As I moved to New York, I ended up doing a substance abuse program following my second DUI as well. And as I reflect back on the two experiences, I had quite a different experience the second time, engaged in substance abuse programs and groups. I remember sitting in my first substance abuse program and feeling so distant and separate from the individuals that are sitting around me. I felt like I couldn't really relate, and that I also wasn't similar to anybody in the room. And I experienced individuals who had many different histories and what has led them here, and either having 1 or 2, 3 DUIs. And I couldn't really quite access and take the opportunity that I did when I was able to sit in my substance abuse program for the second time around. I felt myself sort of being much more aware that although I'm sitting in this room with different individuals who have different histories, and although we are different, we also, I think, are here in a similar space in that we are all holding something heavy and something distressing, and we were all limited in our capacity to understand how to navigate that in a more effective way. I think in that moment, I was able to see and understand much more and access much more about my relationship and dangerous and harmful relationship to alcohol. And I was able to understand a lot more about what draws me and what pulls me to use alcohol. And a lot of that for me was understanding that I utilized alcohol to manage my anxiety, and I managed and to manage my stress. And because I had a limited coping capacity and I didn't really have any other strategies in trying to effectively manage it, I relied on alcohol as a primary way of coping. I think my experience in New York was important and significant in my life. I was able to engage in my life in a different way, and I abstained from alcohol, and I also created a different network that was much more positive for me. I met individuals and I associated with individuals that were in my academic program that also worked alongside me when I was waitressing, and that I also I met individuals who were in my immediate vicinity, my roommates and also friends of friends. And what was important, I think, about this part of my life is that I was able to feel much more fulfilled in a lot of the relationships that I began to foster. And for me, they were meaningful relationships, and it allowed me to sort of feel much more connected. And it was less so just because we were associated with drinking, but more so relationships that were connecting because we had shared interests in life and also our histories. And it was a different way of engaging at that point. I think what was also pivotal in my experience in New York was being a part of the substance abuse program, to where I was able to have relationships with individuals that I met in that group, and was able to sort of learn the different ways in which we each, and including myself, sort of understand ourselves and some of our histories and what we take on and how we attempt to manage some of that. What was also, I think, really, really important for me during this time is anchoring myself in my purpose and anchoring myself in how I wanted to engage in my life moving forward. What I wanted was that I wanted to one day, hopefully at that point, become a clinical psychologist. And it was fulfilling for me to learn and to be engaged in this field, and to start this process and to continue moving and hopefully making up for what I felt like I was losing and what was slipping between my fingertips when I obtained my second DUI. As I continued moving forward, I ended up getting into a program in Washington, D.C. for my doctorate program. And I continued this, I think, path to recovery. I think when I was living in DC and engaged in my program, it was probably at that point, probably one of the most significant experiences, because it provided a lot of stress for me. You know, it was a pretty rigorous program. And what I learned and how I engaged with that and leaned in was different, you know, than what I had understood how to engage with my stress in the past. And I continued doing what I did in New York and engaging in my relationships and building new relationships. And I also ended up taking up exercise and also exploring and having new experiences. And that for me was substantial in being able to provide a sense of relief for my stress. What was also important in my move and transition in the stage to recovery was that I was for the first time engaged in therapy. I saw Dr. Cooper for 3 months in the beginning of my time in DC, and then also ended up seeing Dr. Jennifer Joyner for about a year prior to me leaving to Pennsylvania for an internship. My experiences in therapy were eye-opening. I think in a lot of ways I learned much more about my history and much more about my dynamics and much more about what makes me and what has led me to sort of develop my identity in terms of my values, my belief system, the way that I engage with my relationships, and the way that I understand my goals, and the way that I regulate my emotions, specifically distressing emotions. What was also important during this time in therapy was being able to understand what my relationship to alcohol was at an earlier point in my life, and understanding the ways in which I utilized alcohol in a very harmful and dangerous way. And I was limited again in my capacity to understand different ways of positively coping. What was also important, I think, in this stage of my life when I was living in DC, engaged in therapy, and was engaged in my doctorate program, was that I felt a lot of, I think, passion for this field. And I began to sort of work with clients, and also began to relate to the individuals that I went to school with supervisor and other colleagues, and was able to understand kind of what it means to me to feel inspired. And being a part of this field, I was introduced to that and at this time period. As I moved from DC, I ended up moving to Pennsylvania, and then to do an internship. And I ended up moving back to California because of my home state, and was surprised by my first son, who was born in Pennsylvania, but we started building a life in California following me completing my doctorate program, and which also led me and introduced me to being registered with the Board of Psychology, and then also introduced to the probation process. What I'd like to sort of end with in some ways is just to help you all understand what I've taken from my experience, throughout my rehabilitative process and my recovery processes. What I have experienced is that I think I have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for what I have at this very moment when it comes to being a parent, and when it comes to my career and what I have built and tried so hard to sort of build from the last 11 years. I think what's important for me throughout this process is being able to understand myself in a different way. So I'm much more capable of understanding how to navigate distressing situations and challenging situations. I feel like in many ways, my level of awareness for who I am and the way that I engage with my expectations and my goals is significant in this process to recovery. I feel like in a lot of ways being in this position at this moment, and engaging in this field and the need to sort of attend to your self-care is something that we're always taught. And I think that it's even hard to sort of identify and define, but I think that throughout my recovery process, I've been able to learn that much more. within this process, I've been also able to understand the ways in which I feel like I need structure and the way that I need to hold onto a relapse prevention plan for myself when it comes to understanding my vulnerabilities, when it comes to understanding the way that I manage stress, the way that I balance life, and some of the ways in which I slip up, or some of the ways in which I need to access my positive support system. What's been important also too is to try to keep myself accountable, and the way that I've done that is being able to attend to, you know, my structure and what my limitations are and how much I can put on my plate, and understanding that it's okay to sort of reach out to help sometimes, and it's okay to reach out to the positive supports, and it's okay to sort of identify the individuals that I feel close to and safe with so they can also continue to keep me accountable. I think what I hold most now that I didn't hold back then is that I am a mom, and I love my 2 little human beings that live with me, and they depend on me. And I think that I'm a different individual than I once was, you know, and I think holding my career and holding myself as a parent, I want to create a stable and reliable and loving environment for my children. And I went through a significant experience in 2018, and I am the only primary physical and financial caregiver for my children. And I think that it's important not only holding them in mind and what allows me to sort of get up every day, and also allows me to, what inspires me to sort of be, you know, is not only my children, but also just this love for this field, and also my clients, and sort of being able to be in this process, you know, with them in therapy. And I think that I've learned a lot throughout the last 11 years, and I'm looking forward to moving forward, and I know what I have to lose, and I will do everything that it is in my power to try to protect that, and to be proactive in being able to manage who I am, how I manage stress, and also how to better balance my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. Mr. Gatchett, do you have questions?
I do, Your Honor. Dr. Jimenez, the 2005 DUI, do you remember what your blood alcohol level was during that stop?
I do not.
And what time did that occur?
I think it was in the evening. Yes. Nighttime. Yep.
And reading the paperwork, it appeared that at the time you were underage, you were 20 years old when that occurred?
Yes.
And so I'm assuming you used some sort of fake identification to get access to alcohol, or how did that occur?
I think I had a fake ID, yes.
After the 2005 DUI, did you ever make a decision to stop drinking?
I did not.
And why didn't you make that decision at that time?
I think at that time I wasn't quite aware of my relationship to alcohol. I think at that point I was really sitting with denial and also rationalization, and really was, I didn't really take full accountability, you know, for the seriousness of my behavior, and also didn't really experience myself as having a problematic relationship to alcohol at that time.
And did you continue to keep drinking after the 2005 DUI?
I did.
2008, you were in San Diego?
Yes.
All right. And what happened in that DUI stop?
In 2008, I remember going to a bar with a couple of my friends, and I ended up driving my friend's car, who had a broken headlight, and I ended up getting pulled over after having a couple glasses of wine, and then pulled over because the headlight was out.
And do you remember what your blood alcohol level was during that stop?
I do not.
Okay, after the 2008 DUI, did you make a decision to stop drinking?
I did.
And what is your sobriety date?
My sober date from that point was when I got my second DUI, and I stopped for a couple of years.
And then you said you stopped for a couple of years. Did you begin drinking again at some point?
I did.
And when was that?
At some points in New York, after a couple of years, as I understood my journey to recovery, I better understood sort of myself and my relationship to alcohol, and me being able to abstain for a couple of years and being able to identify that my use of alcohol was more so to obtain an outlet and also to attempt to manage my stress. Within that time period, I also identified different ways of managing my anxiety and stress and was able to utilize those strategies in a way that was helpful and supportive for me. Following those 2 years, I ended up drinking, but not in the capacity that I once had. I've never experienced any physiological sort of components when speaking about my relationship to alcohol. I've never experienced withdrawals or cravings. And at that point, when I did take up drinking again, it was something that was not used to manage stress. And in some ways, it was to enjoy a glass of wine or two with dinner. And it wasn't challenging for me to just have 1 or 2 glasses of wine. And given my recovery from that standpoint, from when I stopped drinking to that point, and as I still maintain that I still continue and on it, I was able to feel okay drinking. And
so you began partaking in, as you're stating in your testimony, a glass or 2 of wine again in 2010. Now, currently, you're on probation that prevents you from drinking alcohol.
yes,
Okay, so I'm going to surmise here that from 2010 to when you were placed on probation with the board in 2016, would that be fair to say that was the drinking pattern that you're describing? Occasionally in a social setting, 1 to 2 glasses of wine.
yes. But I also had my son. So when I was pregnant and also breastfeeding, I was not drinking at all, including, yeah.
Okay, with the exception of when you were carrying your son and then breastfeeding, those periods of time you weren't drinking. But aside from those periods of time, socially from 2010 to 2016, there were times that you were drinking after your second DUI.
Yes. And yep.
Okay. Now your probation ends in January of 2020. There was some tolling in there when you weren't practicing. Can you tell us why you believe it should terminate early?
I think that it should terminate early. It's because I think that I've grown in a lot of ways. I do feel like I have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for what I have in my life, and because of what I hold and how intentional I am and how mindful I am in what I've done within the last 11 years to be who I am at this very moment. I think that to me speaks to my level of motivation to attend to how to take care of myself in a different way. I think for the last 11 years, I've worked hard and tirelessly to be where I am when it comes to developing or building this career. And I've done well in being able to be a parent to both of my children and to create a stable household. And also, I've done a lot when it comes to being engaged in this field and working competently and also reliably and safely when it comes to working with my clients. I think that what speaks to a lot of, what I've done within the last 11 years is that I'm much more aware and much more, I've developed a greater sense of insight into who I am and how I function and how my history impacts my identity in the ways that, and I also hold a more nuanced capacity to understand the different effective ways of managing my stress. And I think that I'm also holding that I want to continue moving forward, and I care deeply about where I am and this path, and I don't want anything to move me away from that. I think that in my life, I've also really created a network of positive supports that I'm able to rely on that helps me sustain and maintain the path that I'm currently on. And I feel strongly and confident in my ability to access them when needed. I think at times also, too, my experience with therapy has been significant in being a reliable sense of support. When it comes to managing what it is that I hold on a daily basis in terms of balancing my career, balancing parenting, and balancing my own life and the way that I hold myself. I think that also, too, given what I do and given sort of my knowledge of and experience working with clients, it's been significant in being able to, as I'm helping others and supporting others in their own journey to supporting themselves in order for them to move forward and obtain and work towards their goals, I have done so myself. And I think that a testament to that has been the last 11 years and moving away from where I was at the time of these convictions.
Dr. Jimenez, I want to focus you a little bit. The question was, why do you want to terminate your probation?
Sorry. A little rant there. Why would I like to terminate? I think that I'm ready to terminate. I'd love to terminate because I think in many ways this experience, although I understand it, there's also ways in which it has impacted my family greatly, especially as it relates to...
Wait, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can we go off the record for a second? I don't think the court reporter can hear you. I think we need to wait until the screaming outside the door stops.
For the record, it appears we have a school group that's probably walking outside the door going to the museum.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. Back on the record. Do you want to finish that statement?
Sure.
Okay.
I think for me, I have gained a lot from the experience of probation, and I understand the purpose, and I understand how my history raises concerns in terms of my level of competence and also just me being able to be a reliable clinician who can safely practice. I think that I have been rehabilitated in a lot of ways, and I still do maintain that I still am in a path to recovery. And I think that I've taken the steps necessary in order to move forward, and I feel confident in my ability to do well outside of this. I think also another reason that I'd love to be off of probation is that it would benefit my family in many ways, as it's been challenging over the last year to move from one place of employment to the next. And it's been difficult to financially have some stability, as it relates to that, living in the Bay Area and also raising 2 kids.
If you're taken off probation, do you plan on drinking alcohol again?
I don't. I think my experience on probation has been significant. It has reminded me and reengaged me with the seriousness of what it means to be compromised in this role and what it means to be compromised and helping and supporting individuals and vulnerable populations and individuals that are needing my support. I think it's reminded me of how important it is for me to attend to my self-care and also attend to the ways in which I need to take care of myself in order to show up for the people that I care most about. For me, even prior to going on probation, my experience of drinking has been so intermittent and infrequent. And although I did note that on social occasions or just every now and then that I would drink a glass of wine here or two, but it has been pretty infrequent that it's me not being able to drink for the last 2 years. And with my pregnancies, it's not something that I need, and it's not something that as I move forward, something that I still would like to go back to, as this experience with probation has certainly been, it's been an experience.
You would agree with the statement that for you, a person of your size, that it doesn't take a lot of alcohol for you to get a driving under the influence conviction. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you understand that even 1 or 2 glasses of wine or 1 or 2 drinks, that could actually lead to a DUI conviction.
Yes.
Is driving under the influence dangerous?
I think it is.
Why?
because you can potentially harm yourself and anybody else in the car. I think it has some pretty significant consequences, as driving a motor vehicle and not regarding the lives of other people around you, that could have a detrimental impact on myself and anybody else.
And you understand that if you do choose to start drinking again and you were to get another driving under the influence conviction, that would impact your licensure with this board.
Yes.
And you understand why that is?
Yes, I do.
Why is that?
I think that it would impact it because, just from my experience with having 2 convictions and having this relationship to probation as of right now, it's been significant. And although that happened, these convictions happened over a decade ago. I can only imagine what it would be like if I were to be using alcohol and be licensed and have another DUI. I think that what's important to note is that I'm an individual who has a significant role and responsibility to the individuals that I'm serving. And if I'm compromised in any way, that's significant, and that there could be some detrimental consequences when it comes to neglecting my clients, when it comes to not seeing things, and when it comes to not me having the my full faculties and being able to engage in the way that is important for the role that I hold.
I know there was a violation in December of 2017. There was a missed test violation. Do you remember that?
I do.
What did you learn about that experience in terms of following and being more proactive with following your obligations on probation?
I think what I learned from that experience was learning that I needed to, the information that I needed to utilize the app in order to identify different testing sites that were available if I were to be tested on a Sunday. I think in terms of being proactive, I think it was part of that citation was about me needing to adhere to all the stipulations of my probation and being as proactive as possible. And I think that I felt for myself, I made a concerted effort in trying to identify and call the right individuals to ask for assistance. But I think that I missed something at that point. And so I was able to learn a little bit more about what other resources I can utilize in order to make that happen.
In your direct testimony, you talked about stress that's in your life. You're a mother, 2 children. You've just stated that you're the sole financial support for them. On probation, you have a number of different terms that are ensuring that your stress goes through a healthy outlet. You have a practice monitor, you have psychotherapy appointments, you are being alcohol tested to ensure that you're not drinking. Assuming probation is terminated, what are the support structures that will be left either from this probation or that you are going to create yourself to ensure that stress doesn't lead to a return to 2005, 2008?
I think that I'm going to continue being supported in therapy. I work also in an organization where we have supervisors, so I'll continue to maintain my supervisors as well. I also have a pretty supportive network when it comes to in the work setting. We have consultation groups in which I am able to meet with other therapists and talk about, cases. And I think that that's another level of accountability in that sense. I also have positive support systems, in place in terms of my own relationships, personal relationships to my family members, and also to close counterparts and friends that I feel very safe with, and also feel very connected with. And so I think all of that I would like to continue to maintain. As an individual that also works in the community, I have access to information when it comes to resources. And so if I were to feel like I'm vulnerable or feel like I'm triggered and do need resources in terms of going to AA, I have that at my fingertips as well. And I will continue to maintain those.
Did you complete the 12-step program in AA?
I did not.
Why not?
At the time that I abstained from drinking following my second DUI, I, at that point, I think anchored myself much more so in my recovery process by understanding that I wanted to move forward and anchoring myself in my sense of like achievement and goal for achievement and moving towards my academic and also career focus was very supportive for me at that moment in time. What was also important and supportive for me was being engaged in that substance abuse program following the second conviction, and also just building a different network and a positive network that would allowed me to replace some of what led me to drink in the first place. And for me at that time, it didn't really sort of pull me to do the 12-step program. And so as I continued moving forward and continuing to move to my academic program, I didn't really feel like I drank in the same capacity and I had the same relationship to alcohol, and it didn't pull me to do the 12-step program.
You don't consider yourself an alcoholic?
I don't consider myself as having the same problematic relationship to alcohol that I once did. I think that I maintain that recovery and also rehabilitation will be an ongoing and continual process that I'll continue throughout my life. But I don't consider myself to have the same harmful and dangerous relationship to alcohol that I once did.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the board, starting all the way at my left. Dr. Kasuga, is that right? Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Hernandez. I just have a question about the relapse prevention plan that you laid out on the packet.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that? How did you pick that, and have you utilized that plan in the past 10 years?
I have, yeah. I think that for me, my relapse prevention plan is understanding a little bit more about the way that I manage and access my positive support system, and also how I am much more aware of some of my vulnerabilities and some of my triggers. You know, throughout the last 11 years, I've been able to understand the parts of myself and my history that impact the way that I think about my goals and the pressures that I put on myself and some of my expectations, which I think also lends itself to a significant amount of anxiety. And me, within the last 11 years, being able to be aware of that and to develop that awareness, I'm much more able to understand in my life how to access the supports that I do have when it comes to my therapist and when it comes to the positive relationships that I've built since this time period that don't just relate and aren't in association to drinking, but it's about developing meaningful relationships with others in which we have shared interests and also just connect in a different and deeper way. What's been important, especially in my relapse prevention plan, is being able to access and be mindful of what I appreciate in my purpose in life, and what I appreciate in what I hold and value in my life. All of those things, I think it's important not only with my self-awareness, being able to understand my triggers, understanding how to access my supports, who my supports are, and being able to understand how to better balance my life and to create a sense of structure is important. And I've done that within the last 11 years as well. I think even just if we were to continue to break that down a little bit in terms of structure, you know, being intentional about my day and my routine, you know, and my weeks and then my months. And a part of a relapse prevention plan for me is understanding how to keep myself accountable, and me providing myself structure, and me understanding my limitations, and me understanding the individuals that I can turn to if I need support. I think all of that is important in understanding how to move forward and to have better balance in my life. What's also been important within this relapse prevention plan is accessing, yes, the supports that I noted, and accessing the positive supports that I've noted, and then also understanding that I can always go to an AA meeting.
So just to, I'm just trying to kind of like see how you would implement this relapse plan. So let's say something stressful happened.
Mhm.
Can you think about something concrete that happened the past 10 years where you've used this plan and like was able to carry out the plan and it helped you and prevented you from using?
Sure. So last year, in 2018, I was going through a divorce and I had a lot on my plate as it came to that significant transition in my life. I had 2 young children, and I worked full time, and I was very overwhelmed when it came to stress and when it came to understanding what was happening in terms of coming to understand and accept what the separation meant and also what it meant for me to be a single mom. For me, what was helpful last year and was going to therapy. And I think that that was a significant source of support. For me is also accessing my positive support system, in which I also understood at work what was happening is I was not just at work, I wasn't sleeping while working, but I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. And noticing that inside I wasn't able to focus. And all of that being said, I needed to identify my support system, which I did, and I accessed. I went to therapy and I saw my therapist once a week. I was able to access my outside positive support system when it came to my friends and when it came to my family. I was also able to utilize some of my family support system, especially when it came to helping me manage caretaking for the children. Given that I don't have a lot of time and working full time and also being a full-time mom, it was difficult for me to be able to work out, and working out was something that has been significant in being able to relieve some of the stress for me as well. So within this last year, what was helpful is being able to access my supports, going to therapy, and taking up the role in the way that I can when it comes to being a mom. And that allowed me to abstain from alcohol. I was able to manage my stress in a way that I've been able to work through it. And I would say that therapy was pretty significant in that.
Did you have cravings when you were going through that stressful time in your life?
No, I didn't. I think that also alcohol has been, again, so intermittent even prior to going on probation that it hasn't been in my repertoire as a strategy for coping in many years. And I didn't have a pull, and I didn't have any cravings related to alcohol. And I think also part of that too is even being a mom, I don't have a lot of sleep just generally, and just to even compromise sleep with drinking is another deterrent for me even wanting to take that up as well. But that's besides the point. But yeah.
And I just wanted to have one more question with regards your current professional support at work. So the consultation that you mentioned and the supervision, is that mandatory in your work setting, or is it something that you seek and would still have in case you change jobs, for instance?
So that is a part of my my work at a nonprofit community organization in Oakland, and that is a part of my organization. But if I were to transition out of that, there is an opportunity in working with colleagues outside where I can access, consultation groups. And I think that for me, that would be very important because that's been pretty supportive and being able to discuss cases and also just to have a level of support when it comes to what comes up for you in the work as well. So that's something that I would continue to access outside of working at my current place of employment.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but do you have any questions?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jimenez, for sharing with us. I just have one question. I noticed that you had mentioned, or I trust that I heard that you said that, or did you say that you would continue therapy?
Yes, I will continue therapy.
For how long? will this be a part of your life?
Yes. I think that even prior to going on probation, and in my experience in therapy and also just kind of being in this field, it is important for me to feel supported and to have a space where I can not only talk about what's challenging in my own personal life, but also what's challenging about doing this work. And for me, within the last, I think, when I've had my experience with therapy, it's been extremely supportive, both, not just being in probation, but being able to have a space to understand myself in a way, and to continue to maintain some of the tools that'll be useful in allowing me to maintain this path. So I will continue. Yeah. You're welcome.
Dr. Tate?
Hi, Dr. Kasuga covered my question, so thank you.
Thank you.
I was confused by your answer. Do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
I do not consider myself an alcoholic.
Do you consider yourself to have a substance use disorder?
I consider myself to be in recovery. And at this moment, I do not consider myself to have a problematic relationship with substance use.
So the answer would be no, you don't have a substance use disorder?
No.
And what are you recovering from?
I would say that I'm recovering from having a limited understanding of myself and also the ways in which I understand and handle my stress. I think that, and also recovering from a limited capacity and understanding how to utilize different ways of effectively coping with the stress.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on my right? Mr. Fu?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Dr. Mendez. Just to clarify, in the last 11 years, have you been arrested and or convicted of alcohol-related crimes, including to but not limited to public intoxication or driving under the influence?
No.
This includes your time in Pennsylvania when you were intermittently using alcohol in social settings, correct?
In Pennsylvania, I was pregnant at the time.
Oh, okay.
No.
Understood. And you saw clients during your time in Pennsylvania?
I did.
And did any of the clients ever file a complaint related to the use of alcohol when you were treating them?
No.
And you missed a test in December 2017, and in 2018 you had significant stressors that you've mentioned. Were you ever called to test in 2018? To test for alcohol in 2018?
Yes.
And did you ever test positive?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Warren?
I don't have any questions, thanks.
Ms. Bernal?
I do not have any questions, thank you.
Dr. Sheets?
Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us your history and being so candid. I have a few questions. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned that your family was very supportive and caring despite somewhat restrictive experiences. Can you talk about how your family may have been affected by your use of alcohol?
I'd say just recalling my experience of them, they experienced, I think, a significant kind of amount of shame, I think, and embarrassment also about what they feel like they've taught me throughout my life. That they, at the very beginning, have really expected a lot, but also really instilled the value of responsibility and also instilled the value of being able to regard others in a positive way and teaching pro-social behaviors and also trying to minimize my own risk to myself. And I think that it was something that was significant in them feeling like they kind of failed, me when I moved forward and ended up obtaining these convictions. It was something that was hard for them, to understand, given what they have felt like that they taught me throughout my life. And for them, I think that they were also holding on to what was difficult and what I also held in terms of just how this was going to compromise my future and what I've been building up at that point, to that point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in a treatment program that you felt it was very hard for you to feel that the other people in the group, that you could relate to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned that, 12-step program didn't necessarily seem to fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, did you ever work a program through the steps?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the steps is about making amends to others. And excuse me, in terms of the recovery work you've done so far, have you done anything in that regard around making amends? And could you tell us a little bit about that experience and who to, if in fact that's the case?
Sure. The amends that I can really kind of think about at this very moment has been to my parents. I think that it was a pretty significant experience for them, for me to obtain these DUIs. And it was important for me, I think, given also our relationship, and I do feel close to them. And I think that I experienced them to be very hurt by this. And I think it was also important for me at that time to express and to tell them a little bit about what I've shared with you today in terms of just my own process and what has pulled me to use alcohol and how I would like to continue moving forward and changing my life, and some of the ways that I have, what I've learned throughout my process and what I plan on continuing to kind of think about as I move forward. I think at some points, especially, following my second one, sharing and apologizing for embarrassing them, and for making them feel as they were, and what kind of came up for them as I ended up, obtaining these DUIs.
Okay. So have you heard of programs like Smart Recovery?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about how they might be relevant for you in your situation as you see it?
So I sort of a little bit, I kind of know. Okay.
Yeah, tell us what you know about those programs first.
So Smart Recovery, it's not coming to mind right at this moment.
So these are programs that believe that people who have had problems with alcohol can learn again to use alcohol in appropriate ways and have that not be problematic, as say opposed to 12-step programs which rely on the concept of abstinence. So, I know you answered that you don't really see yourself as an alcoholic. And there was that time where you did drink, you described, during that period of time when you were in the East, that there was a period of time. Did you say how long that was?
It was probably intermittent from like my last year of living in New York, probably for about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would sort of break up this 11-year time period,
yeah.
Right? And so it feels like it became a problem, and that the probation is part of the structure to keep you from drinking.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering if there were a program, and there are a program out there like Smart Recovery, where there's a belief in that program that you could do some drinking responsibly. How do you think that might be a fit for you?
I mean, I think also my experience in probation has really reconnected me to the sort of gravity of the behaviors that led to this conviction. And I actually really would like to move forward abstaining, but if I were to answer your question, how that would fit, if I were to decide to use alcohol again following this probation period, I don't think that.
You could say it doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So when the structure of the probation is removed, then you're still committed to not drinking.
Yes.
Okay. So I have one more question.
Sure.
So last year you said was a high stress year for you. And, in our ethics code, it talks about self-care, and you mentioned that in your statement. And you talked about using some of your resources in supervision or in speaking with colleagues to help yourself through that. Can you think about maybe how do you feel maybe that your clients may have been affected? And did you ever think, I know there's financial considerations, but did you ever think about maybe limiting, you were working full time, limiting the number of hours that you were working?
To be honest with you, I did not consider myself, I was going through a significant amount of stress. But when it came to my work, that was in some ways sort of a reprieve from some of the distress that I was experiencing personally. But I didn't experience my stress to impact my work. I think for me, it is important for me to be stable and balanced, when I am in that capacity and also engaged. And if I found myself at all sort of slipping from that or being distracted to the point to where I couldn't be there in the way that I would ideally like as a clinician, I would have made the steps to sort of understand how to, mitigate that. But that's not what I experienced. But to answer the other question about if I had ever thought about limiting my hours, no. I mean, given the financial stress, it was significant. And it was difficult to even manage, working full time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Ms. Jones.
Good morning, Dr. Jimenez.
Good morning.
Some of my questions have been asked, but I have two clarifications. In your statement, you mentioned a lot of information and with great detail about the support you had and the strategies you had in DC and in New York. Do you feel like you had that same kind of structure, or not structure, but the same level of support? And again, going back to the question I was asked earlier about a plan, do you feel like you had that same level currently in California?
I think that I have more of structure and support here than I did in DC, actually, because I have more of my family here, and also a lot more of I do have a social circle in DC that was pretty supportive as well, but it's much more substantial here, as I grew up here, and there's a sense of safety much more, and I do feel like it is pretty reliable, in terms of just even trying to balance kind of my everyday when it comes to, my children and also my work. And it's much more easily accessible when it comes to just understanding my different support systems and being able to balance that.
And in addition to support systems, you also talked about actual exercise, actual activities. And I know you said you do need structure. And so what does that structure look like? You mentioned the therapy, continuing that, but are there other avenues of structure that you foresee moving forward if probation was removed?
Yes. So working out has been something that I want to continue doing. Running for me, it definitely sort of enhances my mood and also just makes me feel much more energetic. And so moving forward, what I will continue to do and what I do now is being able to understand that I have, sort of my workout routines 2 to 3 times a week inside the home or outside. It's also part of my structure is being able to understand how I can provide myself with rewards of self-care. So if that means having my children kind of stay with their grandparents for a little bit so I can have a day to myself, where I am not thinking about work and where I'm not doing anything else but for myself. And I think that that's important in being able to restore and reinvigorate and re-energize myself. What's also important in my structure is being able to plan out my meals for the week and for the children and I, when it comes to balanced meals, and also getting sleep, so my structure for myself is not, having designated times that's, designated and allocated for work, and also designated times of when I should, be putting myself to bed, which sometimes is tricky, but that's something I will continue to work on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Mr. Getchett, anything further?
No further questions.
Okay. Thank you both very much. The matter is submitted. We are off the record.
Thank you.
Dr. Jimenez, before you leave, the court reporter will have a sheet that gives you information about ordering a transcript if you'd like to. So Before you go, just check in with the court reporter.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So why don't we take a break for 5 minutes to return for the next petition hearing?
Let's go on the record. We are on the record before the Board of Psychology to review the petition for reinstatement of Deborah Langley, OAH number 2018-120966. My name is Heather Rowan. I'm an administrative law judge. I've been assigned to preside over this matter. Prior to going on the record this morning, we identified that a quorum of the board is present. May I take the appearance for the Attorney General, please?
I guess we're still in the morning. Good morning, Your Honor. John Gatschet, G-A-T-S-C-H-E-T, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General's Office pursuant to Government Code 11522.
Thank you, Mr. Gatschet. And on behalf of the petitioner?
I'm sorry?
Just taking your appearance. On behalf of the petitioner?
On behalf of the petitioner, my name is Steve Frankel, and today I'm in attorney mode, but I'm also a psychologist.
Thank you. And seated with you is petitioner Ms. Langley. Mr. Gatschet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. And so just like the last petition that we did to the board members, I'll be just giving a brief summary and then admitting the documents. We've already talked about a few documents we're going to be asking to seal, and we'll cover those when we get to them. And then there's also a new exhibit that was provided today, and I'm going to refer to it as the Shulman letter, S-H-U-L-M-A-N. I've provided that, or that's been provided to you, and that'll be exhibit 25, and we'll get to that in the list. The brief overview of this case is Ms. Langley, also was known at a different time as Dr. Kotler, was a member of the psychology profession for a number of years when she received a conviction for shoplifting. I was the Deputy Attorney General that handled her initial case that came through our office. It was a situation where she was at a Sears and she had taken items, asked for a refund. They were items that she did not own, but she walked to the register, asked for a refund and gift cards. Then store security watched her go back, take additional items, exit the store with that merchandise and the gift cards that she had procured without paying for them. And then she was arrested and she was convicted of shoplifting. In the course of that case, we also had two other convictions that were referenced in the accusation, a 2010 shoplifting case and then also a 2005 shoplifting case. And so that was the nature of the accusation that came forward. At the time, Dr. Kotler, and when she lost her license, became Ms. Kotler, and then later Ms. Langley, chose to surrender her license. And so she voluntarily entered a surrender. There was a period of time that she asked for a reconsideration after she had entered that surrender agreement, but the board chose not to grant her reconsideration, chose to accept her surrender, and she has been unlicensed since that time. This is her first petition for reinstatement of her license. I would also note that during that time, she, at the time that the psychology board proceedings were going forward, she applied for licensure with the California Nursing Board. She was granted a probationary license. We'll talk about that. That probationary term has been terminated. She successfully did that last year. So she is no longer on license probation with the Nursing Board and has an unrestricted license with the Nursing Board. Okay, the exhibits as they're set forth in your packet. Exhibit 1 is the decision and order in case 201090780. That's the OAH case number. And then the agency case number 600-2013-00032. Those are pages 1 through 13. Exhibit 2 is the order denying petition for reconsideration by the board as it related to that decision and order following her surrender, pages 14 to 16. Exhibit 3 are the notice of assigned hearing dates in this matter, and I would note the petitioner is here with her attorney, pages 17 to 18. Exhibit 4 is the certificate of surrendered licensure, and that's page 19. Exhibit 5 is her petition for reinstatement. It includes a narrative statement that begins on page 28, and those are pages 20 through 32.
Mr. Gatchett,
Yes,
you don't have to say the page numbers.
very good. Exhibit 6, list of continuing education courses. Exhibit 7, request by the board for live scan, and that was completed. Exhibit 8 is a psychiatric evaluation dated March 8th, 2016, conducted by a Dr. Chris Esguerra, Esguerra. And I've talked to Dr. Frankel. We're going to make an oral request to have that document sealed as part of OAH's record. Exhibit 9 are the certificates of CME completion. Well, I guess they'd be continuing education, not CME. Exhibit 10, letter of recommendation, Dennis McFadden. Exhibit 11, letter of recommendation, Denise Dreitzas, Dritsas. Exhibit 12 is a letter of completion from a shoplifting prevention course. Exhibit 13 is a letter of recommendation from a Dr. Redelant, Radellant. Exhibit 14 is a letter of recommendation or a letter from her attorney, Dr. Frankel, Frankel. Exhibit 15 is a letter of recommendation from Dr. Ann Petrovich. She's a retired psychologist, Petrovich. Exhibit 16 is a letter of recommendation from her treating psychologist, Dr. Blasband, Blasband. Exhibit 17 are the certified documents from the California Nursing Board related to her probationary license and the granting of the termination of that probationary license. And then the license numbers listed there. Exhibit 18 is her records of treatment with Dr. Blasband. And his name again is Blasband. I've talked to Dr. Frankel, and I are going to request orally that those records contained in Exhibit 18 are sealed as part of OAH's record. Exhibit 19 is a copy of her driver's license. Exhibit 20 is the transcript of the interview conducted with Nicole Walker on July 26, 2018 on behalf of the Psychology Board. Exhibit 21 are copies of the certified court documents showing that she's received 1203.4 dismissal in her criminal case. Exhibit 22 is the curriculum vitae of the petitioner. Exhibit 23 is a transcript of a second follow-up interview with the board on August 8th, 2018. Exhibit 24 is the investigative report of Special Investigator Nicole Walker on behalf of the Board of Psychology. And then Exhibit 25 are the documents provided today, and I'll refer to them as the Schulman letter, Shulamman. And on the back side of that, it appears as an update of just a list of current CEUs that the petitioner has completed. Ask that all those documents be marked for identification, and with the exceptions of 8 and 18 admitted into evidence. And then as to 8 and 18, ask they be admitted into evidence pursuant to an order sealing those documents from further discovery without further order of the OAH.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. Dr. Frankel, save Exhibits 8 and 18. Do you have any objections to these documents?
No, I don't.
Okay. 1 through 25 will be admitted. I will complete and serve an order, a protective order for 8 and 18. Anything further, Mr. Gatchett?
No, Your Honor, not at this time. Thank you.
Dr. Frankel, did you want to make a statement today, or does your client wish to make a statement?
You will make a statement, but I will make a very brief opening, if that would be okay with Your Honor.
Okay, yes. Will you please use the microphone?
They can share as well.
I'm really glad to be here with my client this morning. I was with her when she was heard by the Board of Nursing. And as I've indicated in one of my letters, people who do what I do at least in this role for today, view the Board of Nursing as the toughest board there is. And the Board of Nursing documents that are in the file are really worth your review, because what they clearly say is what I've learned about this client, which is that she is open, honest, forthright, and willing to share, and is, in that regard, someone who is well on the way toward healing from the dark period of her life. Thank you very much. You want to make an opening?
And Dr. Langley, did you want to give a statement today?
I'll read a statement. I have something to read.
You have something to read? Okay. Raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, if you're going to read, I want to caution you to read slowly. The court reporter is taking down everything you say, and when we read, we tend to read a little faster. So she just needs to be able to hear you, so use the microphone and take everything down. Okay. Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. I've worked very hard over the past few years to address issues in my life that led to surrendering my psychologist license. I'm sorry, this is emotional for me to read. Could you please?
Would it be okay, Your Honor, if I read it?
Yes, just for the record, Dr. Langley has prepared a statement, a written statement, and Dr. Frankel will read it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I have worked very hard over the last few years to address issues in my life that led to the surrendering of my psychologist license. My rehabilitation has included completing an anti-theft program, parens, for which you have a certificate of completion, close parens, undergoing extensive psychotherapy, parens, you will see a letter from my former therapist as well as my past therapist, close parens, completing a psychiatric evaluation, parens, a copy of which was sent to you, close parens. In addition to this, I have also addressed my spiritual life by attending church regularly, as well as attending a growth group every other week. Parens, a letter from my pastor was mailed to you, close parens. Pastor. I now understand the incidents that led to my being convicted of shoplifting. When I was working at Coalinga State Hospital from 2010 to 2012, I was struggling with unbearable anxiety and impulses to shoplift. It was not until after leaving that institution that I understood the complexity of the underlying issues that led to these feelings and subsequent behaviors. First, Coalinga State Hospital is a facility built to house the most violent sexual predators in the state of California, rapists and pedophiles. As a psychologist working there, I had daily interactions with these individuals. While working at Coalinga State Hospital, I lost my primary support system. I lost my mother and the only sister, both to cancer in the same year. This was further compounded by working in a setting that was causing me a tremendous amount of anxiety. It wasn't until exploring this in therapy that I began talking about my past and why these impulses began to be triggered. This is not something I would normally talk about because it is very shameful, but my father served time in prison for rape and was a pedophile. As you can imagine, working in a setting such as this was triggering many unresolved feelings and was coming out in unmanageable anxiety. The way I would get some relief from the anxiety was to steal things. I don't mean to use this as an excuse, because there is no excuse for what I have done. I stole things and was deceptive about returning stolen items for credit. What I did was wrong. These offenses led to criminal action against me. I have since paid fines, completed community service, and paid back the stores that I took items from. I have tried to make this into a turning point to better my life. I now know to pay attention and monitor to my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when I am experiencing severe anxiety. Today, as part of my rehabilitation, I do most of my shopping online. If I do need to go shopping, I take my husband or daughter with me. Another part of my rehabilitation was to create other activities besides shopping to occupy my time. I don't use shopping as a hobby or an outlet anymore. Instead, I have new hobbies such as volunteering, parens Unchained Local Garden Club. I'm sorry? Unchained. Local Garden Club, Love Our Central Coast, and Red Cross, close parens. I attend biweekly growth group, garden, cook, read, and play pickleball regularly. And recently, I joined a book club, co-chair of Silent.
Oh, that's okay. I'll read that. Silent auction.
Okay. Okay. End of statement.
Thank you. Mr. Gatchett, do you have some questions?
I do. All right. Ms. Langley, I know that you had shoplifting convictions in 2005, 2010, and 2011. Approximately how many times did you engage in shoplifting in your life?
Between 40 and 50 times.
And so when did the shoplifting start?
It started before the conviction in 2005. It started shortly after my divorce.
Shortly after what?
My divorce, and that was in 2001.
So it started sometime after 2001, and then when did it end?
It ended in 2005, and then it reoccurred in 2010 and 11.
And you said that approximately 40 to 50 times you engaged in this behavior. When was the majority of that time, or was it equally divided between those two periods?
It was probably more in the 2010, 2011.
Dr. Langley, could you bring the microphone a little closer to you? I think the court reporter is having a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
Now, what was the stress? You've talked about the Coalinga State Hospital was a big reason for the stress that led to the stealing or the shoplifting in 2010 and 2011. What were the stressors that were forcing your conduct in 2001 to 2005?
I think the divorce had a lot to do with it, and then my father passed away. That brought up a lot of issues. And my husband, the reason for the divorce is he had been stealing from our financial accounts, and I didn't know about it until about 4 years after. And we both had to sign to take out money on any of the accounts. And by the time I found, I kept looking through, and it kept going down and down and down. And I said, something's going on here. I said, do you think, the broker is being honest? And the broker was a family friend of their family. So he said, no, that's not it. And so I said, well, I think I'm going to call and find out. And he said, no, I've been forging your name. And so I didn't press charges because I thought it's not going to help any. And he's a psychologist as well. So I said if he lost his license, then he wouldn't be able to practice and help the children. It's psychology. He's a psychologist. He still is a psychologist. But it was $250,000 by the time I found out that I'd lost. So I think that triggered a lot of it.
So take me through the first time that you shoplifted. Do you remember that, or do you have any memory of that?
I do. Well, the very first time I ever took anything, I think I was about 5 or 6, and I'd taken a candy bar out of a store, and my mom asked me where I got it when we got out, and I told her, I took it. So she marched me back in the store, and I had to go talk to the manager, and she made me give it back. And so I never stole anything else since that time until 2001. And I remember my children had like a supply list of things they needed for school. And I remember that time putting some things in my purse. Some of the school items that my kids needed, like colored pencils and a protractor and things like that, so I took them.
And at the time, you were practicing as a psychologist?
Yes.
How long had you been in practice?
Since I became licensed in 94, but since postdoc was 92. My postdoc hours in 92 through 94, and I became licensed in 94.
So from your licensure, approximately 7 to 8 years at that point?
Yes.
And then it stopped in 2005, based on your testimony. Why did it stop?
When I went through treatment, through therapy and counseling, I just didn't feel the need to do it anymore.
At any time in that period of time from 2001 to 2005, did you take any financial advantage of any of your patients?
No.
And you were practicing during that time?
Yes.
Can you describe for the board in the time between 2001 and 2005 when you engaged in shoplifting, how that made you feel?
I'm still very ashamed. I'm still very ashamed about how it made me feel. I felt guilty and then depressed.
Okay, and that's after you performed the act of shoplifting, and I'm guessing in retrospect you thought about it, but what was your feeling when you actually were doing the act of shoplifting?
I would feel release of tension and anxiety.
All right. What kind of treatment or what kind of work were you doing? Were you in private practice, or what kind of work were you doing at that time?
At that time, I was working in academics. I was the assistant director in academics. I was the assistant director of professional training at the California School of Professional Psychology, and I was also teaching part-time, and I had a private practice. The private practice I just did after I graduated from school in 94 to actually I did my postdoc hours there, and then they asked me to stay on. So it was from 92 to 97. And then I went into academics and taught and did administrative work during that time. And
So in 2001 to 2005, you weren't necessarily seeing patients?
no.
Okay. And then you took a job at Coalinga State Hospital. Can you tell us how in 2010 you came to employment at that facility?
Well, before that, I worked, after I left California School of Professional Psychology, I was recruited by University of California, Merced to lead up and direct their be director of their counseling and psychology services. And I did that for 3 years. And then I went to Coalinga State Hospital as a senior psychologist and worked there for 2 years till 2012.
And so what time period were you at UC Merced?
2006 through 2009.
At the time you took the job at Coalinga State Hospital, you stated that you had stopped stealing or stopped engaging in shoplifting in 2005. Did you believe at that time that you were basically cleared of any issues with shoplifting, or that you didn't have any problems with shoplifting?
Yes, I hadn't done that in a few years, so.
Had you tried to understand the triggers that had caused you to shoplift between 2001 and 2005 when you, by the time in 2010 when you took that job?
Yes.
And prior to taking the job in 2010, what were your triggers as you understood them?
During It's always been attributed to loss, whether it's perceived or real. And I think with the divorce, that was a big loss. And financially, it was a big loss. And in 2010 and 11, it was revolving around the loss of my mother and my sister, the loss of my job, the loss of my profession.
Had you worked in any sort of clinical situation, that like an in custody situation, Coalinga State Hospital being not a prison, but being a hospital where in custodies serve as sexually violent predators? No. Had you ever worked in that setting before?
No.
Had you ever worked with sexually violent predators before that time?
No.
Nothing in your training or education?
No.
Why did you take that job?
When my mother got sick, I went to take care of her. And then I was looking for a position. And this one came up. It was as a senior psychologist. And it's not really working with the inmates directly, but it's really a supervisory position where I oversaw the psychologist on the units.
But as a supervisor, you would have been overseeing psychologists that were working directly with sexually violent predators?
Yes.
As you went into that role, did you have a plan in terms of how to deal with the stress, or was it, just tell us about that?
No, I really didn't. I didn't think that it would be that stressful because I wasn't really interacting with the patients that much. I think the thing that caused me the most anxiety initially was going on to the units and locked units and having them just roam around and be near you. And, you know, they make comments and everything. They do that to almost anybody that comes through. So I thought the anxiety was a result of being in a locked facility, just having doors locked behind you and just being sort of enclosed and confined. And like I said, I would get anxious going on the units because you just never know when they're going to come out of their room, or it's you really don't have that much security on the units themselves. When you're in the mall that they would call the open space, there's a security unit so that they have a visual on you and there's mirrors up and everything. But when you're actually on the units, there's the nursing station that is enclosed and locked. So you just sort of focus on getting there. And that seems sort of a safe place. And, you know, when you come in the morning, you're walking with your friends and you're all walking together to go to your particular units. But my office was located upstairs. So it was out of sight of the mall on a higher level where the administrators are. Yeah. Where the administration is.
When did you start stealing, or how soon after taking that job did you start stealing again?
Probably about a month or so after.
When you started engaging in shoplifting, did you recognize that you were in that behavior? Did you try to reach out and stop that behavior? Did you do anything to try to stop that behavior?
You know, I knew that it was becoming a problem again. And I was trying to just control not going shopping and working the hours that we worked. I wasn't able to really get into therapy because I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and the shuttle would leave at 5:30 to get there at 6, you know, usually about 6:45. And then we started at 7, and then there were 10-hour days. So I would get out at 5 and get home around 6:30 at night. So no, I didn't seek therapy at that time. In retrospect, I should have, and I, you know, now know that I would. But at the time, I didn't.
And you said earlier that in your life, that of the 40 to 50 times you've engaged in this conduct, that most of it occurred in that period of time from 2010 to 2011. was there a period, a point, I know that you were arrested in 2010. After the arrest in 2010, did that tell you that you needed to get help, or what did you do with that?
Yes, and I think again, I was working and I went, when this happened, I told my boss about it. And because any state agency gets report if you have a misdemeanor or felony, they automatically get a report. So they did receive report on me later. They when I told them initially, they said they hadn't received anything, and but when they did, I was demoted. Well, initially they put me on a administrative. It wasn't a leave. I was put on the other side of the facility. And there I worked with, basically I was sitting there for about a week, not doing much of anything, just sitting there. And I was on a unit where there was just other administrators. And I was at the front where they would like have a help call-in desk for computer skills, helping them. And so what I noticed is they didn't have a manual, a policy and procedure manual. They didn't have a policy and procedure manual for the psychology services. So I said, I will make one. So that's what I worked on it was about 4 months. I'm not sure about that, 3 or 4 months that I was on the other side. And so I developed this manual, and it ended up being a very thick document. And that was sort of what I wanted to do with my time, something constructive.
Were you still stealing during that time?
Not for about a month. I didn't, and then it came back again. And then the last time I stole, when I was caught, was on New Year's Eve, 2011.
And we'll talk about the 2011 conviction here shortly. When you told your supervisor at Coalinga State Hospital that you had been arrested for shoplifting, the 2010 case, did you also relate to them about all the other shoplifting that you were doing, or did you just tell them about the 2010 arrest?
He knew about the 2004 conviction because when I started to work there, I had to get a security clearance. And so they knew that I had that history.
Okay, and aside from the convictions, did you relate to him about all the other conduct that you were engaging in, or at that time did you keep that private?
I kept it private.
And before the 2011 arrest for shoplifting, were you telling anyone else about the shoplifting that you were engaging in 2010?
No.
All right, let's talk about the 2011 conviction. My understanding in that, and you can tell me if all this is true, is that during that you grabbed items off of a rack, some clothing items, then you walked to a front register and you asked for gift cards. Is that correct?
No, it's actually not that way. I picked up some sheets, and that's what I returned and asked for gift certificate.
Okay, so there were some sheets that you grabbed?
Yes.
All right. And you grabbed some sheets and you walked up to the front register.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you had purchased those previously?
Right.
And that you didn't have a receipt for them?
Right.
And then you asked for gift cards for that?
Yes.
As I understand, typically when I think of shoplifting, it's grabbing clothes off the rack and walking out the store. Okay. What was the impetus of deciding to take items and actually go interface with someone and actually ask for, a cash value for something that was not yours? And basically, the thought here is that you're kind of committing a fraud on that person.
It was fraud.
Okay. Why did you do that?
I think I was fearing that I was going to lose my job and, being very scared about losing money.
How did it make you feel when you did that? And specifically, more of the gift card request or the certificate request.
Initially, when I would walk out of the store, if I walked out and I got away with it, I would feel release and decrease in tension. But this was one of the few times I did that. I did not feel good about it.
So when you asked for the return of those sheets and the placement of the money on the gift card, you're telling me it didn't make you feel good.
No.
Why do you think you did it?
I think, again, it was fear. I think, again, it was fear of, losing my job.
You understand that if the board were to grant you back licensure, potentially you'd be dealing with clients and you would have potential access to their financial information in order for you to bill their information. How would you tell the board that in those situations you'd be able to protect a client's financial information in order that you wouldn't, especially if you were in a situation where you were anxious about a loss of money?
That's never been an issue, never been a problem. I've never stolen from another person, and I wouldn't. And that wouldn't even cross my mind to do that.
Without going into specific numbers, how would you describe your current financial situation? Are you pretty stable at this point?
Stable.
And I know that you've remarried.
Yes.
How long have you been in that marriage?
16 years.
And your spouse, what's their form of, or what is their employment, or what's their background?
He received his degree in mathematics from Cambridge, and he was the vice president of engineering at Cisco in Silicon Valley, and he retired early from that position at 50, and so he's retired now.
All right. Now, I know at Coalinga State Hospital, when you left that employment, it was more than just the 2011 shoplifting. And I'll go into that. You took a test to become a supervisor. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And during the testing, you received a booklet with the testing materials. What was that booklet?
It was actually like this. It was a booklet like this, and it was open with test questions in it.
Okay. And so they were the test questions for people that were applying for the position?
Right.
And it would be fair to say that those testing materials, they did belong to the Coalinga State Hospital. They were
Right.
state property.
Right.
And then my understanding is during the examination, you took the exam, you had brought some journal articles with you, and that when you left the exam, that you said in July of 2018 that it was a mistake, but you grabbed the booklet and with the journal articles that you bought.
The journal articles were in folders like this as well, and when I went to pick them up, I picked up the booklet as well with me, and I took them to my car and laid it in the front seat of my car, and that's where they were.
Okay. And the journal articles, were they on top of the booklet or
Yes,
the manila folder?
yes.
Okay. You didn't notice that the manila folder, that the items you were leaving with were heavier than the items, for example, you
No,
came in with.
because it was just a booklet with maybe 2 pages of test questions.
And then my understanding is you went back to your office, you brought either some cookies or some brownies, and you went back to your office, and then when you were in your office, the supervisor who administered the test approached you.
Yes, I can tell you exactly what happened if you like.
Well, I think we can burn through this pretty quick, but the supervisor asked you if you had taken the testing booklet. Is that correct?
Right.
And your immediate answer was no.
No.
And then you followed that with, I don't think so.
Right.
Why was your answer no? Why were you that answer to me evokes a certainty that no, I didn't take it.
Right. I didn't think I took it. And then I said, I don't think so. And he said, well, did you go anywhere else before you came over here? And I said, yes, I went to my car to drop off my my journal articles that I've been reading. And he says, well, can we go to your car? And sure. So I went, and we went to my car, and there they were right in the front seat. If I had stolen it, I wouldn't leave it in the front seat of my car. And I had no need to steal it. I had taken that test before, and I did fine on it. So
You didn't have an intent to take those
No,
questions and give them
no.
to someone else?
No.
And based on that, the 2011 theft conviction and then that action during the testing, basically Coalinga State Hospital brought an adverse action against you?
They said that yes, and they said but I could resign in lieu of any adverse action, so I did that.
All right. My questions are almost done. If you receive your license back as a licensed psychologist, in what field do you plan on working?
It would be a part-time private practice with adult clients. Private practice with adult clients.
You'd like to work on your own?
I would probably join a group.
Would you take care of clients' monies and accounts, or would you have someone else take care of that for you?
Someone else.
What's your current employment status?
I'm unemployed right now.
You're unemployed?
Right.
I noticed that in March of 2018, the nursing board took you off probation and that you received a full, free and clear nursing license. Why in the last 10 months haven't you sought to get a position in nursing?
You know, I did go for an interview at one place, and it was a nursing home, but it really was a place where they discharge people after surgery. And when they told me the typical ratio for nursing to patient is 5-to-1, and when I asked what their ratio was, it was 15-to-1. And I was a new nurse. I'm an older nurse. And so I didn't think that fit my qualifications. And it was pretty acute caseload. I have looked at nursing. Really, the reason I went back for my nursing degree was that it was a life goal of mine. I wanted to have the knowledge. And I'd always thought that in retirement I would use it to go on humanitarian trips. Humanitarian.
I just asked that. You have a long history that you've described of being an educator, being in administration and education. I mean, was there any thought of using that nursing degree to get a job potentially in a program like that, to go into education or be an administrator?
No, you would really have to go and get your bachelor's or your master's to be in administration for nursing, unless you worked your way up and started early.
All right. I mean, this is going to be a more open-ended question, but how can you promise the board that going forward you're going to exist in a trustworthy existence?
I can't make any promises, but I know that I feel a lot more stable than I did in 2010, 2012, and then in 2005. I think I have a lot more things in place now. Losing my support system hit me hard. But now I have friends. I belong to 2 groups, a growth group, which is a church group, a growth group, and we meet every other week, and it's about 12 individuals in that. And then I belong to, I attend therapy. And let's see, I belong to the gardening club, and I'm actually on the board for that. And so I do a lot of volunteer work. So I'm very busy. I keep busy. And I think that there's just so many things in place now that I haven't had that need. I haven't had that desire for a while now. So.
And you said you attend therapy. How often do you attend therapy?
When I first started, I went weekly, then we went to biweekly, and now I go in and check in once a month, unless something's going on, which it hasn't been for a while.
If the board grants you licensure based on your petition, there's a pretty good strong likelihood that if they do, they're going to grant you a probationary license with terms and conditions. Should they do that, are you willing to follow those terms and conditions?
Yes.
And you're familiar with probation as you just finished a probation with the nursing board?
Right.
You had no problems or no violations while you were on your nursing board probation?
No.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. I understand that before I open it up for board questions, you have one witness you would like to call.
Yes, just briefly, Your Honor. And Attorney General's office would call Nicole Walker.
Good afternoon, Ms. Walker. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Will you please say and spell your name for the record?
Nicole Walker, NicoleWalker.
Mr. Gatchett.
And Ms. Walker, where are you currently employed?
Board of Psychology.
And in what role are you employed with the board?
Special investigator.
How long have you been with the board?
Since May of 2018.
And are you familiar with the petitioner that's here today, Ms. Langley, also formerly known as Ms. Cotler, Dr. Cotler?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And how are you familiar?
I conducted the background investigation with Dr. Langley.
All right. And in her terms of her surrender agreement, was there a cost recovery award?
Yes, there was.
All right. And do you know what the amount was?
I believe the amount was approximately $8,692.
Sounds about right. How about $8,691.50?
That sounds perfect.
Good. Let's go with that. Were you able to check the board's records regarding that cost recovery?
I did have the opportunity to check the records.
And has she paid any money on that $8,691.50?
She has not.
Okay. And so prior to her reinstatement of her licensure, you would have an expectation that there would be an order for her to pay that full amount?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Dr. Frankel, any questions for Ms. Walker?
Pardon me?
I was asking,
Oh,
Dr. Frankel, do you have any questions for Ms. Walker before she's released?
Yes,
Go ahead.
just one. Can you tell the board?
Wait, Mr. Frankel, I'm sorry. Before I release Ms. Walker, do you have any questions?
For Nicole
her?
Walker?
Yes.
I have no questions for Nicole Walker.
Okay. You're free to step down. Okay. I'd like to give the board the opportunity to ask some questions. And Dr. Frankel, if you want to add anything at the end that has not been answered, I'll give you that opportunity. Dr. Kasuga.
I don't have questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Akweya Badu.
Good morning. Good morning. Just one question. What would be 3 things that you would have to use to, when this feeling or those feelings are about to happen, what could you readily go to that would kind of circumvent you're actually going through with perhaps shoplifting?
Well, I have several things. I think the first thing is I don't go shopping alone. If I go with my husband or my daughter, or I'll go with a friend. The second thing is counseling, therapy. Still checking in. If I needed to, I could, call my therapist. And then another thing that was just brought to light that I could do that wasn't available when I first put on probation or surrendered my license is the Schulman Center is the only center I know of for shoplifting, and they have a number that you can call anytime and talk with other people. So it's sort of like a support group for shoplifters.
Dr. Tate?
Yes.
Dr. Phillips?
Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon. So you've been married to your current husband for 16 years, did you say? Okay. So all of the convictions for shoplifting occurred during your current marriage,
Yes.
not during
No.
prior marriage. Okay. You took and you pointed to in your paperwork the fact that you'd taken a shoplifting prevention course. Isn't it true you had another shoplifting conviction after that?
Yes.
Okay. We have the evaluation from the Shulman Center.
Yes.
He talked to you for 1 hour on the phone?
Yes, we had talked before, but this was an evaluation he did on the phone.
Okay. And it was based on that 1 hour telephone conversation?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think I have any.
Shulman,
I don't have any other questions.
oh, I was just going to say he's the expert in shoplifting. There aren't that many people that deal with shoplifters. And he's an attorney as well as a former shoplifter himself. And he's not a marriage and family, but he's a social worker. He's been on CNN, on the Oprah show, and just past week. Oh,
I think that you've answered Dr. Phillips' question.
Okay.
If there's further information you want to add to that, you can later.
Okay.
Mr. Fu.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Langley. What acts of restitution have you done in response to this?
I paid back the institutions where I took merchandise from. I'm sorry. I paid back the institutions where I took their merchandise from. I also did community service at Goodwill, and then later I did community service at an organization, nonprofit called Boys to Men, Girls to Women.
And those volunteer experiences you've described, were they a part of a court order or
No.
they were on your own? Okay, great.
I did that on my own.
And with regard to the $8,000 or so, I'm not as precise as Ms. Walker. I'm very impressed by that. Would you consider that paying back the board for those as a part of restitution?
Absolutely.
And what were some of the obstacles in between you being noticed about that $8,000 and now in terms of making those payments?
I didn't understand. I didn't know that I was supposed to pay anything back. I thought it was at the time that my license is renewed or taken off or reinstituted that I would at that point pay. Nobody ever told me to make payments or to that I was supposed to pay that back.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Horn.
I just have a couple of questions, Dr. Langley. The first one, this might be a little difficult. Why did you give up your license?
Because I felt unworthy. I felt like I had brought shame to myself, my family, I said I felt unworthy. I felt like I brought shame to myself, my family, my profession. I didn't feel worthy of it.
You said when you were talking to us that if you do have systems in place and you do have things or experiences that you can access if you feel the urge to shoplift again. But you haven't really experienced that, you said.
No.
And so what would come to mind, or what feeling would you have, or whatever that would tell you going forward if you were to get your license as a psychologist back, that you were at risk again?
I would think the anxiety, the overwhelming anxiety that I have, that would be one of the things. I think some of the triggers that I have is I'll start saving bags. That's what I did in the past, saving bags from stores. I know that is a trigger for me to show that I'm on that slippery slope, and I would get into therapy right away if that were to happen, but that hasn't happened in years.
And I have one more question. I see two evaluations, one by a psychiatrist and one by Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Have you ever been evaluated by a psychologist?
You know, with the nursing board, they said to get a psychological evaluation. And so I called psychologists. First of all, in Monterey, there aren't that many psychologists that do psychological evaluations. And then when I did get one, I chose the person, and they wrote back that this person was on probation, and so they wouldn't accept him. And then later, I found somebody else, and they said, "No, we want a psychiatrist." But they had said psychological assessment, but they said that they didn't want a psychologist; they wanted a psychiatrist. That's why I sought out the one that I did.
Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Ms. Bernal?
Thank you.
Dr. Sheets?
Thank you, Dr. Langley. Which name do you prefer?
Langley.
Langley. Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned in a statement in the paperwork that we have that if you were seeing clients again, and you told us that you'd be seeing an adult client population on a part-time basis, if you began to feel that you had cravings or were having some problems, that you would refer them ultimately, but that you would discuss with them your difficulties. Can you tell me a little bit about how you might share something like that with a client?
Well, I think like any client, if say there was a client you had some negative effects that you didn't like for whatever reason, and you weren't going to be a good service to them, then I wouldn't tell them, I don't like you, or so I'm going to refer you. But I'd say, that there are some issues that's coming up for me, and I don't feel that I'm the best match for you, and give them some 3 or 4 names of therapists that I might refer to them. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm wondering, you said that you would share with the clients what your difficulties are. So not so much that they're vulnerable. I think nobody would want to hear that they weren't liked, even though we understand that can happen, that there's not a good match. But so if you started to feel that you were having some difficulties and you would take your clients and refer them, and that was what you had said,
Right.
I just wondered what might you tell your clients about what those difficulties were? How much would you say?
If a client came in and said, they knew about my shoplifting, is that what you're referring to?
If you started to feel that you needed to get back into therapy, your anxiety was increasing, you were concerned about your ability to adequately serve clients. That was my impression from what you wrote.
Okay. I think yes. If I start to get incredibly anxious around a particular client, I would definitely address that in therapy. But I would also get in therapy myself. And in the past, when I did therapy, I was always part of a supervision or a consultation group, so I had some place to go to and to sort of bounce ideas off of them. So yes. Okay.
So do you know of any 12-step groups that might be useful?
When I first had this from, I searched everywhere, and even in 2000, when I first had this problem, I searched everywhere for a group. I could not find anything. I couldn't find anything in California, and it wasn't until I read the book, Something for Nothing, that Dr. Schulman wrote, that I went and I was reading over his bio, and I saw that he was a social worker as well. And so I called him up and sort of talked to him and asked him if there were anything else. And he said he hadn't heard of anything, that the Schulman Center is sort of specialized, that it deals with shoplifting, and it deals with compulsive shopping and hoarding behaviors. So I haven't found anything other than that.
Any 12-step
No.
programs?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you. Dr. Langley, I have a couple of questions to follow up. I guess in March of 2015, that's when you surrendered, but then you petitioned immediately for reconsideration. What prompted that based upon your answer you just gave to Dr. Horn?
Okay. When my attorney at the time told me, he says, you have 2 days to make up your mind. And I'm thinking, wow, that's not very long, 2 days. So I called my therapist to try to get in to process with her, and she was booked. So I called one of my former supervisors and met with her. And as she's reading the statement, she's getting increasingly angry and saying, this is a bunch of BS, You've already paid restitution. You've already done community service. You've already addressed this. I don't know why they're making you go through this again. So I think it sort of had a flavor of righteous indignation. So I did, and then I thought, well, I also realized that if your license is on probation, this was something the former attorney told me. He said, get in private practice. So I went and I got in with the group, and I had my office all ready to go. I was starting to submit my CV to get on insurance panels, and I kept getting insurance panels to provide therapy. And I kept getting rejection. And then finally one of them told me, they said, you're not going to get on any insurance panel as long as your license is on probation or even encumbered. So I wouldn't, even if it was on probation, I wouldn't be able to practice as a psychologist because the insurance companies won't allow you. If you were on the insurance panel and then this happened to you, that's a different story. But trying to get on insurance panels, in an encumbered state, they won't. And so I wouldn't be able to practice even if that were so. That's why I'm asking for reinstatement.
So I'm confused. So you just said, so did you then surrender because of righteous indignation or because you didn't feel worthy?
Both.
Okay.
I heard her, and then I thought, I just don't feel good about it. And then later on, I really reflected and said, in a way, it was a good thing. Because I got my life back together, and I got my moral compass, and they're headed in the right direction.
So my next question is, you talked about the 40 to 50 times was between 2001 and 2005. So the loss, and then you remarried. What stopped in 2005? And then you said it picked back up again in 2010 and 2011.
I think the trigger for me was my father's death, and then when I sort of worked through that with the therapist and everything, it sort of just went underground. It didn't happen anymore. I didn't have the impulses or the cravings. And then it came back again, which is not uncommon in reading, that this does happen, because I thought that was bizarre too. And then I read about it, and I guess it's not that uncommon.
And then here in Mr. Schulman, or Dr. Schulman, I guess, Mr. Schulman's response, on the first page, he says she reports that she had no early history of theft, behavior, or dishonesty. In your testimony earlier, you talked about as a young person.
The candy bar.
Yeah. And so I just was wondering, in terms of how information was communicated, was that shared to him like you shared it with us today?
I think I did. I think, I don't think he saw that as shoplifting as a 5 or 6 year old, taking candy, but it was shoplifting.
Yeah, I was going to say, because
Right.
How would you define that?
Right. I would define it now as shoplifting, definitely.
And then one last question about that. I mean, I think the questions about taking the test, do you see that is related to some of your activity with the shoplifting?
I could see how a person would say that she took that, but it was really a mistake. I really did just pick it up like I would pick up everything and take it with me. And it was in the same color as the testing booklet. And, I've been on the other side of doing that testing and assessment. And if I look, I've been on the other side of that table where I was doing the assessments on people and the testing. And if I looked down and saw that booklet was gone, I would be up in my chair chasing after them. I wouldn't be waiting 2, hours later, coming and asking somebody if they took it.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Judge Rowan, can I ask a question?
Yes, and Dr. Phillips has said that he has a couple more questions as well.
I just have some questions with regards your work at Coalinga. So it seems like working with the Coalinga population caused you a lot of stress and anxiety that led to the shoplifting behavior. When did you realize that it probably wasn't a good fit for you to be working in that?
I really didn't realize it at that point. It didn't click for me. I thought it was just being confined and being, anxious about somebody hurting me, because that did happen, pretty frequently there. It wasn't until later that it wasn't even in therapy. Like, it was one of these aha things. It was outside of therapy that I was processing it, thinking about it. Yes, it wasn't in the session that I remember, thought that. It was outside when you're thinking and processing therapy and thinking about things that happened.
So when did that occur to you? Do you remember what time in the timeline that occurred?
No, I don't remember when I had that aha, but I just remember thinking when I just had that, experience of realizing what it was about. But then when I started talking in therapy, and then I realized, okay, did the connection with my father, I had sort of minimized that, how significant it was.
And you were able to talk about this and process this
In therapy, yes.
Looking back, did you think that there was any client harm due to some of your feelings towards the population you were serving?
I really didn't have direct contact other than doing a group. So, no, probably not. Just doing reports, because I was over a team called DCAT. A team called DCAT, Disabilities Cognitive Assessment Team, and they would just supply me with different things. The social worker would bring a report, and my job was just sort of to put it all together and then present it to administration on risk management.
It's my understanding that you were doing some so were you doing reviews, or were you actually giving recommendations for their rehabilitation while in the facility?
They were mainly behavioral mod programs. Say one was having manic episodes and walking in the corridors at night, yelling and screaming and keeping people awake. So, we would track that data, when it happened, why it happened, medications, and then we just sort of put it all together. And like my team, I had a nurse, I had a social worker, I had a psych tech, and then myself, and then we would give the report. A psych tech. So as far as direct one-on-one, it really wasn't that type of situation there.
And
as far as direct one-on-one therapy, I wasn't doing that there.
And you felt like the biases you hold, or the feelings that you hold with regards this particular population, didn't impact you in
I tried not to let it know. I mean, that was something they asked in the interview, can you work with this population? And I've always been non-biased, and I've treated them with dignity, and so no, I've never had a problem. But I know that it causes me anxiety, and I don't want to work with that population in the future. It causes me anxiety, and I don't want to work with that population in the future.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dr. Phillips?
So when you were working at Coalinga State Hospital, you were having intense anxiety, and you thought the anxiety was about confinement, and you didn't make the connection between the fact your father was a sex offender and that the hospital was full of sex offenders. And that didn't occur to you till after you'd been fired or resigned?
It wasn't until later that I was processing in therapy. I thought I had dealt with that, and I thought I had a good handle on that. And then I guess I really minimized it and didn't think that it impacted me as much as it really did.
Okay. Now, you said as part of your process of recovering from the actions you've taken in terms of taking things that aren't yours, that you paid restitution, correct?
Yes.
And was the restitution in the criminal cases?
Yes.
It was part of the order that you had to pay restitution.
Right.
You said you've shoplifted approximately 40 or 50 times.
Yes.
Have you paid restitution to all the stores you took money from?
Lots of times when I would take the items, I would take them back and just leave them on a shelf. And I did that, or I would take it home and just throw it away because I really didn't have any use for it.
But did you ever, for the ones that you kept and maybe took home and threw away,
Right.
did you ever pay restitution for those?
No, not for those.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Fu, you had one more question?
As a quick follow-up to Board Member Jones' question, you mentioned that you had administered exams before while you were at the hospital?
I had administered, yes, I was a senior psychologist when I was first hired. So when people are up for promotion or want to go to the next level, the senior psychologists are usually the ones interviewing.
So were those test questions that you administered previously also in manila folders?
Yes, like this.
So you knew going into, so you had prior experience that, or you had prior knowledge that test questions would be in a manila folder?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. I'd like to just clarify on a question that I had asked.
Okay.
My question was based on a statement you made that how would you handle, this was the question I asked, if you had, you felt like you were compromised in some way, maybe your anxiety had increased and you were working with clients in general, and you said that your plan would be to give them referrals and also discuss with them what difficulties you were having. And I'm not sure I got an answer, not that I was looking for a particular answer, but I'd just like to understand a little bit more about how you might address sort of boundaries, recognizing your clients are vulnerable people, and to hear what your difficulties might be. I'm just trying to understand your sense of sensitivity, how you might be respectful of those boundaries and the vulnerability of the people you're working with. They trust you, and then to say, well, whatever you might say, how that might impact them. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about what would you say to them?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Like, if I'm having trouble working with them because they're a sex offender, or
because you in the documents it was you would recognize this was part of your plan.
Right.
If you were having trouble, maybe your anxiety was increased, and you were having trouble such that you needed to refer your clients to someone else, not
Yeah.
because of anything in particular about them, but about what was going on for you.
Well, I think, just monitoring and knowing those feelings, that if there was something coming up for me and I was having a lot of issues with the client and I felt that I was doing them an injustice or not somehow blindsided or not treating their issue, then I would probably consult. I know I would consult. But if I felt like that I wasn't able to treat them, I would process that with them like any therapist. I'd say, I'm having trouble treating you for whatever reason. I mean, it's hard to say when, hypothetically what it might be. But if I'm not a good match or a good therapist or I'm not doing my job right, then I'm going to recommend that they find somebody else and give them some names of somebody else.
You know what? I think I'm not being clear.
I know what you're asking, but I don't know how else to
Let
answer
me
it.
just try to make it a little clearer. If I were your client,
Okay.
and you started to have more anxiety, and so you knew that you needed to not see not just me, but 3 or 4, you need to reduce your practice, right? But I'm one of your clients, and you thought, I need to probably refer my clients so I can cut it back, so I can deal with my own issues. What would you say to me if I was one of the people you were going to have to refer? But coming from the perspective, you had said that you would share your difficulties. I wanted to understand how you might tell me what was going on.
Well, I think I would tell them, being a therapist doesn't mean that you're immune to, not having problems. And talk with them that, there's some personal things that are coming up in my life right now, and I don't feel that I can serve you as a client at this point. And I would then say that what I would like to explore with them is I would like to take some time off to deal with this. And in the meantime, there's some options. You could see these individuals, or if you want to wait, it may take me, 6 months, and then we could resume at that point. But I would talk with them about that.
That's what I was trying to.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Before.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Frankel, was there anything that you wanted to add? You started to ask a question. I'm not sure if it's been answered.
It's been answered, Your Honor.
Okay. With that, I believe we have all of the exhibits. I will issue the protective order. The record is now closed. The matters.
Pursuant to 11522, I believe the Attorney General's office is allowed to provide a position on whether this petition should be granted or not, in addition to advise the board. I'd ask for that. I'd request that opportunity.
Briefly.
The Attorney General's office opposes this petition for reinstatement for the following reasons, and it was covered actually in many of the questions. The shoplifting occurred throughout the current.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't have the current microphone. The Attorney General's office opposes this petition for the following reasons. The shoplifting occurred throughout the current marriage. The 2011 fraud aspect of the theft, she stated was for fear of losing money, but I would note that she was in that marriage at that time, and she stated today it was a stable financial system today. I would assume it was a stable financial system then. There's an inconsistency. Reasons behind her surrender were inconsistent, as she stated to the board, both that she said she was unworthy and then at the same time saying that she was indignant. Her statements don't show a very good lack of remorse. The Shulman letter and the inconsistency regarding the theft as a 6-year-old that was stated here and stating that there was no prior theft is an inconsistency. The petitioner wants a free and clear license to work in private practice, but doesn't seem to understand the need for the board to have oversight, even if she's re-given a license. She actually stated that she would not be able to be in private practice if she's given a probationary license. There's a lack of understanding that even if the board were to give her a license, there would still be a need for terms and conditions to ensure that her patients were protected financially. There's been no proactive payment to the stores where she stole that did not result in criminal convictions. I would note that she's under no obligation to pay restitution to the board until her license is reinstated for the $8,000 and change for cost recovery. However, she's made no proactive ability to actually pay that debt off before even seeking the petition. And finally, the 2012 hiring issue with the testing issue, there's a number of inconsistencies even in that statement. And I think Board Member Fu pointed it out that she'd actually given this test previously and had seen what those folders were. I'm not sure she's showing the adequate amount of remorse for that instant even in itself, which is another thing that is kind of unrelated to the kleptomania that led to her loss of license. So based on her statements today and the statements, both the answers to my questions, the answers to the board's questions, the Attorney General's office would oppose her petition for reinstatement.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. Given that I allowed Mr. Gatchett to make a statement, Dr. Frankel, did you want to add anything?
Yes, Your Honor. You have seen who my client is. She is open. She is honest. She is clear. She is terribly remorseful. She has been terribly full of shame. Shame is the toughest emotion that human beings can deal with. She has been doing that in ways that are helpful and painful. Her appearance here re-triggers a lot of the kinds of difficulties that she had, but did not bring out how, in fact, she behaves day to day, week to week, month to month. And the fact of the matter is that with the support system that she has, with the marriage that she has, with the knowledge that she has about her history and how it's contributed to her difficulties, she has become very trustworthy. What you have seen is her openness. I told you that when we started, and I told you that in my letter. This is an open human being. I support her petition for reinstatement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frankel. With that, the matter is submitted. The record is closed. We are off the record. Prior to leaving, make sure you pick up the court reporter's billing detail. Miranda should have it for you momentarily. Dr. Phillips.
So we are now going to go into closed session to consider the petition hearings that we heard this morning and into the afternoon. Also to look at some other matters related to enforcement that the board is asked to discuss. And we will also be discussing the lawsuit by RioCan against the Board of Psychology and the individual members of the Board of Psychology. And with that in mind, we will now go into closed session. Just so you understand, there's going to be a very brief report from counsel after we go into closed session that will, under attorney-client privilege, inform us of what's going on relative to the RioCan suit. We will then break for lunch. We will then come back and speak with the ALJ regarding these two cases, and then we'll go on to the other enforcement matters that we've deferred until later. So with that in mind, thank you very much, and vamos.